The first time Maria counted her coins on the kitchen table, the metallic clink against the worn formica sounded like a prison door closing. $3.17. That was all that stood between her and the next sunrise. She had counted those same coins the night before, and the night before that, arranging them in careful stacks, as if organizing them differently might somehow multiply their value. But mathematics doesn't bend to desperation, and copper and nickel don't transform into gold, no matter how many times you rearrange them. She was 43 years old, living in a studio apartment in Newark, where the radiator clanged through winter nights like a ghost rattling chains, and she had become an expert in the art of survival on almost nothing. $3 a day. That was her budget, her boundary, her entire economic universe. And for 782 days, she had lived within those iron constraints, never exceeding, never cheating, never allowing herself the luxury of hope that things might change. Until the day she made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her entire existence. A choice so simple, yet so profound, that it would eventually teach her something about wealth that most people spend their entire lives never understanding. The radiator hissed in the corner of her apartment, a sound she had grown so accustomed to that she barely noticed it anymore. Outside her window, Newark spread out in layers of brick and concrete, the January sky pressing down like a grey wool blanket. Maria had come to America 17 years ago with dreams that now seemed almost laughable in their innocence. She had imagined herself transformed, successful, sending money home to her mother in Guatemala, perhaps even bringing her family here to join her. Instead, she found herself trapped in a cycle of minimum-wage jobs and unexpected setbacks that had gradually eroded everything she had built. The factory where she had worked for 9 years closed without warning. Her savings, carefully accumulated over nearly a decade, disappeared in 6 months of unemployment and her mother's medical emergency back home. Then came the jobs that barely covered rent, the hours cut, the positions eliminated, until she found herself here, in this moment, with $3.17 and a decision to make about breakfast. If you're watching this from somewhere in America, I want you to do something for me right now. Take a moment and comment below what city you're in. Tell me where you are as you hear this story, because Maria's journey isn't just hers. It's happening in cities and towns across this country, and I want to know you're there, listening, perhaps seeing pieces of your own struggle in hers. And if this story speaks to you, if it touches something real, hit that subscribe button. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story about poverty, it's a story about the most profound financial transformation you can imagine, and the lessons here might just change how you see money forever. Maria picked up the coins and dropped them into an old jam jar she kept on the windowsill. $3.17. She could make eggs last 3 days if she was careful. A carton of 18 eggs at the discount store cost $2.49. That left her 68 cents for everything else, which meant she would skip lunch, as she always did, and dinner would be a slice of bread with butter if she had any, or plain if she didn't. She had learned to ignore hunger, to treat it like background noise, the way she ignored the radiators hissing or the couple arguing in the apartment above hers. Hunger was just another condition of her life, no more remarkable than the cold that seeped through the windows or the loneliness that filled the spaces between her waking and sleeping. The thing about living on $3 a day is that it strips away everything except the essential. Maria had learned this gradually, painfully, through a series of small surrenders. First went the luxuries she had once taken for granted, the coffee from the bodega, the occasional movie, the birthday card sent home with $20 tucked inside. Then went the necessities that most people never even think of as negotiable. Shampoo became a luxury, replaced by a bar of soap that served double duty. The bus fare became an extravagance, so she walked everywhere, her feet developing calluses that told the story of miles accumulated in the name of saving $1.50. Her phone plan was cancelled, leaving her with only Wi-Fi from the library or the occasional unlocked network. Gradually, systematically, she had dismantled her life down to its barest components, discovering in the process that human beings can survive on far less than they ever imagined, but that survival and living are two entirely different things. She had kept a notebook for the first year, writing down every single penny she spent, a habit she had learned from her mother, who had kept similar records in a ledger with a faded blue cover back in Guatemala. Maria's notebook was a small, spiral-bound thing she had found in a trash can outside an elementary school, barely used, most of its pages still blank. In it, she recorded her daily expenses with the precision of an accountant and the desperation of someone who knew that a single miscalculation could mean going hungry. January 3rd, $2.98, eggs, bread, butter. January 4th, $3.12, eggs, rice, onion. January 5th, $2.87, beans, tortillas, salt. The pages filled slowly with this careful arithmetic of deprivation, each entry a small poem about the economics of survival, each number a decision made and a sacrifice accepted. But what the notebook didn't capture, what no accounting could ever record, was the psychological weight of this existence, the way poverty compressed her spirit until she felt flattened, two-dimensional, a silhouette of a person rather than a person herself. She had stopped looking in mirrors because she didn't recognize the woman looking back. Her hair, once thick and glossy, had become thin and dull. Her skin had lost its vitality, taking on a grayish tone that came from malnutrition and stress. Her eyes, which had once sparkled with ambition and hope, now held only a kind of weary endurance. She was disappearing, she sometimes thought, fading away one $3 day at a time, until eventually there would be nothing left but a ghost haunting this small room, counting coins for eternity. Yet here's what's remarkable about the human spirit, and here's where the real story begins to reveal itself. On day 782 of living on $3 a day, something inside Maria began to shift. It wasn't dramatic, there was no lightning bolt of inspiration, no sudden clarity. It was more like a small crack appearing in a dam, barely noticeable at first, but carrying within it the potential for everything to change. She was walking past the public library on her way back from the discount store, carrying her small bag of eggs, when she noticed a flyer on the bulletin board. It was bright yellow, impossible to miss against the grey winter afternoon, and it advertised free computer classes every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Something about that flyer stopped her in her tracks. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I want you to take a second and hit that like button if you're still with me, if this story is drawing you in, because what happens next is where everything transforms, and I need to know you're ready for it. Comment below and tell me, have you ever lived on almost nothing? Have you ever had to count every single penny, plan every single meal around what you can afford rather than what you want? Because if you have, you'll understand what comes next in a way that goes deeper than words. Maria stood there on the sidewalk, the cold wind cutting through her thin jacket, staring at that yellow flyer, and something ancient and nearly forgotten stirred inside her. It was the ghost of her younger self, the girl who had crossed borders with nothing but determination and dreams, the woman who had once believed she could build a different life. The flyer promised basic computer skills, email, internet navigation, simple programs. To most people, these would seem like elementary skills, barely worth mentioning, but to Maria, they represented something she had lost touch with over the past 2 years: possibility. She hadn't touched a computer since losing her factory job. She had no email address anymore, no way to search for better employment, no connection to the digital world where, she dimly understood, many of the opportunities now existed. But here's where the real decision came in, the one that would change everything. The classes were free, yes, but they ran from 6 to 8 in the evening, twice a week. And Maria worked an evening shift at a cleaning company, 4 hours a night, 5 nights a week, earning $9 an hour, which came out to $180 a week before taxes, $152 after. Those hours were her lifeline, the difference between $3 a day and no dollars a day. To attend the computer classes, she would have to give up 2 shifts a week, which would cost her $72. $72 might not sound like much to you, wherever you're watching this from, but to Maria, living on $3 a day, $72 represented 24 days of food, 24 days of survival. It was an impossible choice, a luxury she absolutely could not afford. She walked past the library and went home, cooked her single egg, and sat in her apartment as evening fell, thinking about that flyer. The radiator clanged and hissed. The couple upstairs argued about something, their voices rising and falling like a tide. Outside her window, lights came on across Newark, thousands of yellow squares marking other lives being lived, other people making dinner, settling in for the evening, probably not thinking about money at all, or at least not thinking about it the way Maria thought about it, with the obsessive focus of someone for whom money wasn't abstract, but literal survival. She thought about her notebook, about those 782 entries, each one a small monument to endurance, but also to stagnation. She thought about her mother's words, spoken years ago, about how the poorest person isn't the one with no money but the one with no hope. And then Maria made her decision. It was in many ways an insane decision, financially irresponsible by every conventional measure. She decided to give up those 2 shifts and attend the computer classes. She decided to sacrifice $72 a week, over $280 a month, for something that had no guaranteed return, no immediate payoff, nothing but the vague possibility that learning these skills might somehow, eventually, lead to something better. It was, by the cold arithmetic that had governed her life for the past 2 years, a terrible decision. It meant she would have to survive on even less, would have to find ways to stretch her already impossible budget even further. It meant more hunger, more sacrifice, more of everything that had already worn her down to nearly nothing. But here's what Maria understood in that moment, sitting in her dim apartment with the radiator hissing its eternal complaint. Here's the financial wisdom that would eventually prove more valuable than any amount of money in her jam jar. She understood that staying where she was, doing what she had been doing, would guarantee that nothing would ever change. She could keep living on $3 a day, could keep counting her coins, could keep surviving. But survival isn't the same as progress, and endurance isn't the same as hope. She understood that real change, meaningful change, requires risk. It requires giving something up in the present for the possibility of gain in the future. It requires, in other words, investment, even when investment seems impossible, even when you have nothing to invest. If you're watching this and you've ever stood at a crossroads like this, where you had to choose between immediate security and future possibility, leave a comment and share your story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because this channel is all about stories like these, about the real financial decisions that real people face, about the wisdom that comes not from wealth, but from struggle, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The next day, Maria walked back to the library and signed up for the computer class. The librarian who registered her was a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She didn't ask questions about why Maria wanted to take the class or what her goals were. She simply handed her a form, helped her fill it out, and told her that classes started the following Tuesday. Maria walked home feeling both terrified and oddly exhilarated, as if she had jumped off a cliff and was still in the air, not yet knowing whether she would fly or fall, but at least no longer standing still on solid ground, frozen in place by fear and poverty. The first class was overwhelming. The room was full of people from all walks of life, from teenagers to seniors, people who spoke English as their first language, and people like Maria who still struggled with certain phrases and pronunciations. The instructor was a volunteer, a retired IT professional who now spent his time teaching basic digital literacy to anyone who wanted to learn. He was patient and encouraging, qualities Maria hadn't experienced much in the past 2 years. He showed them how to create email addresses, how to navigate the internet, how to use search engines, how to recognize legitimate websites from scams. To most of the younger people in the class, this was remedial. To Maria, it was revolutionary. She took notes in her same small notebook, the one where she had been recording her daily expenses, but now the pages filled with a different kind of information. How to attach a file to an email, how to create a resume in a word processor, how to search for jobs online, how to protect yourself from phishing scams. Each piece of information felt precious, valuable, worth more than the $72 she was sacrificing to be there. After the first class, she stayed behind and asked the instructor if she could practice more, if the library had computers available outside of class time. He told her they did, that the library offered free computer access for 2 hours per day, and that she was welcome to use them as much as she wanted. And so began a routine that would define the next 6 months of Maria's life. She continued working her 3 remaining evening shifts, cleaning offices in downtown Newark, emptying trash cans and vacuuming carpets, and scrubbing toilets for $9 an hour. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she attended the computer class, and every afternoon, before her shift or on her days off, she went to the library and practiced. She spent her 2 hours of free computer time learning, exploring, building skills that had seemed completely out of reach just weeks before. She taught herself to type properly, using a free online program, spending hours drilling herself on the home row keys until her fingers knew them by memory. She learned spreadsheet basics, word processing, email etiquette. She watched free YouTube tutorials about professional skills, about interviews, about resume writing. But here's where the sacrifice became real, where the decision to give up those $72 a week transformed from abstract choice to concrete suffering. Maria's $3 a day budget was already impossible to sustain long-term, and now, with over $200 less per month, it became truly brutal. She couldn't afford eggs anymore, not regularly. Instead, she lived primarily on rice, beans, and whatever vegetables were cheapest at the discount store, usually cabbage or carrots, sometimes onions. She lost weight rapidly, her already thin frame becoming gaunt, her cheekbones sharp, her wrists delicate as bird bones. She was hungry constantly, a gnawing ache that never quite went away, even in sleep. Some nights she would wake up with her stomach cramping, her mouth dry, her body protesting its deprivation. Yet she persisted. Every Tuesday and Thursday she walked to the library for her class. Every afternoon, she claimed her 2 hours on the public computers. She told herself that this sacrifice was temporary, that she was building toward something better. But the truth was, she had no guarantee, no evidence that this gamble would pay off, nothing but a stubborn hope that had somehow survived 782 days of grinding poverty. Her notebook, that small spiral-bound witness to her life, now contained 2 kinds of entries: the daily accounting of her survival, growing more sparse and desperate, and the notes from her learning, growing more detailed and confident. The contrast between the two told a story all its own. Now I want you to pause and think about something. Take a second and really consider this. How many of us say we want to change our circumstances, to improve our lives, to break out of whatever cycle we're caught in, but we're not willing to make the sacrifice required for that change. We want transformation without discomfort, growth without pain, progress without risk. Maria's story is teaching us something profound here, and if you're feeling that weight, that challenge, go ahead and hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what you're working toward right now, what sacrifice you might need to make for your own transformation. And if you haven't subscribed, do it now, because these stories, these lessons, they're what this channel is built on, and you need to hear them all. After 3 months of classes and daily practice, Maria's computer skills had improved dramatically. She could type 40 words per minute, create professional-looking documents, navigate complex websites, manage email conversations, and use basic spreadsheet functions. More importantly, she'd begun to understand how the modern job market worked, how employers searched for candidates, what they looked for in applications, how the entire hiring process had migrated online while she had been disconnected and struggling to survive. She started applying for jobs, positions that paid more than $9 an hour, positions that required computer skills and offered the possibility of benefits, of stability, of a future beyond day-to-day survival. But the applications went nowhere. Week after week, she submitted her carefully crafted resume to dozens of positions. Receptionist, data entry clerk, administrative assistant, office coordinator. She heard nothing back. The silence was crushing, a void that seemed to mock her sacrifice, her hunger, her hope. She had given up so much, was still giving up so much, living now on what amounted to less than $2.50 per day after her rent was paid, and she had nothing to show for it. No interviews, no callbacks, no acknowledgement that her applications had even been seen by human eyes. She began to wonder if she had made a catastrophic mistake, if she had gambled her survival on a fantasy, if she would end up even worse off than before, with diminished income and nothing gained except more advanced skills in how to starve. The doubt was paralyzing. There were moments, alone in her apartment, with her stomach empty and her body weak, when Maria considered giving up, going back to working 5 nights a week, accepting that $3 a day was her ceiling, her maximum, her fate. She thought about all the practical people who would have told her that her decision was foolish, that you can't afford to invest in yourself when you're barely surviving, that training and education are luxuries for people who have the cushion to absorb risk, not for people living on the edge of destitution. And those people would have been right, by every conventional measure of financial wisdom. You don't give up $72 a week when you're living on $3 a day. You don't gamble with your survival for the sake of a possibility. But here's what those practical people would have missed. Here's the deeper truth that Maria was slowly discovering through her suffering and persistence. The conventional financial wisdom that tells us to protect what we have, to avoid risk, to prioritize security above all else. That wisdom assumes we have something worth protecting. When you're living on $3 a day, you don't have security to preserve. You have nothing except the present moment and the slim hope that tomorrow might be different. And in that situation, the safest thing to do, the most secure path, is actually the riskiest, because it guarantees that nothing will ever change. The truly dangerous choice in Maria's situation would have been to stay where she was. On a Tuesday evening in late June, exactly 4 months after she had first seen that yellow flyer, Maria attended what would be her final computer class. The instructor, that patient retired IT professional who had taught her so much, shook her hand at the end and told her she had been one of his best students, that he hoped she would find success, that he believed she would. Maria thanked him, feeling emotion well up in her throat, knowing that this man had given her something far more valuable than computer skills. He had given her hours of his time, his expertise, his encouragement, all for free, expecting nothing in return, and in doing so had demonstrated a kind of generosity that Maria would remember for the rest of her life. She walked home that evening through streets that were finally warm after the long winter, thinking about generosity, about investment, about how the most valuable exchanges sometimes involve no money at all. The next morning she received an email. It was from a small insurance company in Newark, responding to an application she had submitted 3 weeks earlier for a position as a data entry clerk. They wanted to schedule an interview. Maria read the email 3 times, then 4, then 5, unable to quite believe what she was seeing. An interview. After months of silence, months of rejection, someone was actually willing to talk to her. She responded immediately, confirming the interview time, and spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous excitement, unlike anything she had felt in years. This was her chance, her opportunity, the potential payoff for all those months of sacrifice and hunger and hope. And here's where I need you to really pay attention, because what happens next contains a lesson that most people never learn, that most financial advice never teaches, that most success stories skip right over. If you're still watching, leave a comment right now telling me you're here, that you're listening, that you want to hear how this turns out. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because this is the moment where everything changes, where all of Maria's decisions, good and bad, smart and desperate, converge into something that will teach us what money really means. The interview was scheduled for Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Maria had 3 days to prepare, 3 days to figure out how to present herself as a competent professional candidate when she looked like someone who had been living on the edge of starvation for months, because that's exactly what she was. She had no professional clothes, nothing appropriate for an interview. Her wardrobe consisted of the worn jeans and faded shirts she wore to her cleaning job, none of which was suitable for an office environment. She had no money to buy anything new. Even the thrift stores were beyond her budget now. She stood in front of her tiny closet, looking at her meager collection of clothes, and felt despair wash over her. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and now she might lose this opportunity because she didn't have a decent shirt to wear. But then she remembered something. There was a church a few blocks from her apartment that ran a clothing closet, a small room where they gave away donated professional clothes to people looking for work. She had walked past it countless times, had even considered going in, but pride had always stopped her. She didn't want to be someone who needed charity, someone who couldn't provide for herself, someone who had to beg for clothes from strangers. But pride is a luxury like so many other things, and Maria no longer had the luxury of pride. She walked to the church the next morning and explained her situation to the volunteer at the desk, a woman probably 10 years younger than Maria, who listened with compassion and led her to the clothing closet without judgment. The room was small and crowded with racks of donated clothes, everything from business suits to casual wear, all organized by size and type. The volunteer helped Maria find a dark grey blazer that fit reasonably well, a white blouse that was slightly too large but could be tucked in, and a pair of black slacks that needed hemming but would work for an interview. Maria took the clothes home, washed them carefully in her sink with the dish soap she couldn't afford to replace, hung them to dry, and spent that evening hemming the pants by hand with thread she had saved from a button that fell off one of her work shirts months ago. As she sewed, she thought about her mother, who had taught her these skills when she was young, who had shown her how to make do with what little they had, how to stretch resources, how to survive with dignity, even in poverty. The day of the interview, Maria woke early and prepared as carefully as if she were going to something sacred, which in a way she was. This interview represented more than just a job opportunity. It represented validation that her decision had been right, that her sacrifice had meant something, that the past 4 months of hunger and struggle might actually lead somewhere. She put on the clothes from the church clothing closet, and for the first time in 2 years, she looked in the mirror and saw something other than a woman disappearing. She saw someone who might have a future. The insurance company occupied the third floor of a modest office building downtown. Maria arrived 15 minutes early, her heart pounding, her mouth dry. The receptionist directed her to a small waiting area with outdated magazines and uncomfortable chairs. She sat, trying to control her nervousness, reviewing in her mind everything she had learned about interviews from the YouTube videos she had watched at the library. Make eye contact, speak clearly, show confidence, express interest, ask questions. She had practiced her answers to common interview questions, had prepared stories about her work ethic and reliability, had rehearsed how to explain the gap in her employment and the transition from factory work to office work. When her name was called, she followed a woman to a small conference room where two people were waiting. A man in his 50s who introduced himself as the office manager, and a younger woman who was the supervisor for the data entry department. They asked her to sit, offered her water, which she accepted gratefully because her mouth was so dry, and then began the interview. They asked about her previous work experience, her computer skills, her availability, why she was interested in the position. Maria answered each question as honestly and confidently as she could, aware that she was walking a fine line between honesty and desperation, knowing that she needed to show she wanted the job without showing how desperately she needed it. The interview lasted 30 minutes. As it concluded, the office manager asked if she had any questions. Maria asked about the company's approach to employee development, a question she had learned from one of those YouTube videos, designed to show that she was thinking long-term, that she saw this as a career rather than just a job. The office manager seemed pleased by the question and explained that they believed in promoting from within, that several of their supervisors had started in entry-level positions. Then they thanked her for coming in, told her they would make a decision within a week, and showed her out. Maria left the building and walked to the bus stop, then remembered she didn't take the bus anymore, couldn't afford it, and started walking home. As she walked through Newark streets, the afternoon sun hot on her shoulders, she replayed every moment of the interview in her mind, analyzing her answers, wondering if she had said the right things, if she had made a good impression, if she had any real chance at all. The walk home took 45 minutes. By the time she reached her apartment, her feet hurt, and she was exhausted. But she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Not certainty, not confidence, just possibility, which was enough. The week that followed was the longest of Maria's life. Every day, she checked her email multiple times, even though she knew the response wouldn't come immediately. Even though she understood that hiring decisions took time, she continued her routine, working her 3 cleaning shifts, spending her afternoons at the library, living on her increasingly meager food budget. But now everything felt suspended, as if her entire life was holding its breath, waiting for an answer that would determine her future. She had put everything on this gamble, this investment in herself, and now she would find out if it had been worth it. Before I tell you what happened, I want you to think about your own life for a moment. Think about the investments you've made, or the investments you're afraid to make. Think about the risks you've taken, or the risks you've avoided because they seemed too dangerous, too uncertain, too likely to fail. Leave a comment and share one decision you've made that changed your trajectory, or one decision you're considering right now. And if this story is resonating with you, if you're feeling the tension of Maria's waiting, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next is where all the pieces come together, where all the lessons of this journey become clear. 6 days after the interview, Maria received another email. Her hands shook as she opened it. The email was from the office manager, and it was brief. Dear Maria, we are pleased to offer you the position of data entry clerk at a starting salary of $15 per hour with a full benefits package including health insurance. Please respond to this email to confirm your acceptance, and we will send you onboarding information." Maria read the email once, then again, then a third time, and then she sat at the library computer and cried, tears running down her face while the people around her pretended not to notice, giving her the privacy of her emotion. $15 an hour. It doesn't sound like much, does it? In many parts of America, $15 an hour is still barely enough to live on, still considered low-wage work, still a struggle to make ends meet. But for Maria, living on $3 a day, working for $9 an hour with no benefits and no security, $15 an hour represented transformation. It meant she would earn $600 a week before taxes, probably close to $500 after. It meant she could afford to eat properly, to buy clothes when she needed them, to maybe even save a little money. It meant health insurance, sick days, paid vacation. It meant dignity. It meant hope. It meant that her decision, her sacrifice, her investment in herself had paid off in ways that exceeded even her most optimistic expectations. But here's the really important part, the lesson that makes this whole story meaningful. The financial transformation in Maria's life didn't come from luck or from someone giving her money or from winning some kind of lottery. It came from a decision she made when she had almost nothing, a decision to invest in herself, even when that investment seemed impossible. She took money she couldn't afford to give up, $72 a week that represented survival itself, and she converted that money into knowledge, into skills, into capability. She made a bet on her own potential when everything in her circumstances argued against making that bet. And that decision, that act of faith in herself, was what changed everything. Think about the arithmetic of her situation. She gave up $72 per week for 16 weeks, which equals $1,152 total. That's what her computer training cost her in lost wages, not counting the additional suffering from reduced food budget, not counting the physical toll of malnutrition, not counting the emotional weight of that sacrifice. $1,152, and in return, she gained a job that paid $6 more per hour, which, over a 40-hour work week, equals $240 per week, or about $1,000 per month. Her investment paid for itself in less than 5 weeks. After that, it was pure profit, pure gain, pure transformation. But the financial calculation, while impressive, doesn't capture the full value of what Maria gained. She didn't just get a better job. She got her humanity back. She got the ability to think about something other than survival. She got the capacity to imagine a future. She got dignity, purpose, connection to the world, a sense that she mattered, that her life had value beyond mere existence. These things don't show up in a profit and loss statement, can't be quantified in dollars and cents, but they're more valuable than any amount of money because they're what make life worth living. Maria started her new job on a Monday morning in July. She wore the clothes from the church clothing closet, which were now her professional wardrobe, cleaned and pressed and ready. Her first day was overwhelming in the best possible way. She was assigned a desk, given a computer, introduced to her co-workers, trained on the company's software systems. Everything was new and challenging, and she made mistakes, lots of them, but her supervisor was patient and encouraging. Maria worked harder than anyone else in the office, stayed late, came in early, double-checked every entry, asked questions when she didn't understand something. She was determined to prove that she deserved this opportunity, that the company had made the right decision in hiring her. And here's where the story takes another turn, where another lesson emerges from Maria's journey. Remember that notebook she had kept? That small, spiral-bound record of her survival. She brought it with her to her new job, not to record her daily expenses anymore, because she could finally afford to eat without counting every penny, but as a reminder of where she had come from. Sometimes, during her lunch break, she would flip through those pages, reading her careful notations of $3 days, remembering the woman who had lived on the edge of nothing and somehow found the courage to risk everything for the possibility of change. That notebook kept her grounded, kept her grateful, kept her from ever taking for granted the transformation she had achieved. Within 3 months, Maria's supervisor pulled her aside and told her she was doing excellent work, that her attention to detail and work ethic had been noticed, that there would be opportunities for advancement if she continued on this trajectory. Within 6 months, Maria received her first raise, bringing her hourly wage to $16.50. Within a year, she was promoted to a senior data entry position with additional responsibilities and a salary of $40,000 annually. Each milestone felt both earned and miraculous, a validation of that original decision, that original bet she had placed on herself when she had nothing but hope and hunger. But here's what Maria never forgot, and here's why her story matters so much. She never forgot what it felt like to live on $3 a day. She never forgot the hunger, the fear, the crushing weight of poverty that makes you feel invisible and worthless. And because she never forgot, she became someone who helped others in similar situations. She volunteered at that same church clothing closet where she had received her interview outfit. She mentored other women, taking the computer classes at the library. She became an advocate within her company for hiring people with employment gaps and unconventional backgrounds. She understood, in a way that people who have never experienced true poverty can never quite understand, that sometimes the best investment isn't in stocks or real estate or business ventures. Sometimes the best investment is in a person who has nothing but potential and determination. If you're still with me, if you've stayed for this entire journey, I need you to do something right now. Take a moment and think about someone in your life who made an investment in you, who took a chance on you when you had nothing, who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Leave a comment honoring that person, telling their story. And if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, do it now, because stories like Maria's, stories about real financial transformation rooted in human struggle and courage, these are the stories we tell here, and you need to hear them all. 3 years after starting her job at the insurance company, Maria had saved $20,000. $20,000. For someone who had once lived on $3 a day, this amount felt almost incomprehensible, a sum so large it seemed to belong to a different universe entirely. She kept the money in a high-yield savings account, watching it grow slowly with interest, and sometimes she would log into her account just to look at the balance, to confirm that it was real, that she had actually accumulated this safety net that meant she would never have to count coins for food again, never have to choose between eating and surviving, never have to live in that state of constant terror that defined her $3 days. But Maria didn't just save money. She learned about money in a deeper way, studied it the way she had studied computers, with focus and determination and hunger for knowledge. She read books from the library about personal finance, about investing, about building wealth. She watched YouTube videos about budgeting and retirement planning and financial independence. She learned about compound interest, about tax-advantaged accounts, about the difference between assets and liabilities. She discovered that financial literacy wasn't some mysterious knowledge reserved for the wealthy, but a set of skills that anyone could learn, that she could learn, that she had in fact been learning her entire life through the hard school of poverty. And this is where Maria's story reveals its deepest wisdom, the lesson that transcends her individual experience and speaks to something universal about money and wealth and what we mean when we talk about financial success. Maria realized that wealth isn't primarily about the amount of money you have. It's about your relationship with money, your understanding of money, your ability to make good decisions about money. She had been wealthier, in some profound sense, when she was living on $3 a day and making the decision to invest in herself, than many people who earn six-figure salaries but have no savings, no plan, no understanding of how to build a stable financial future. Real wealth is about agency, about having options, about being able to make choices that serve your long-term interests rather than just your immediate survival. This doesn't mean that poverty is a blessing or that struggle is noble or that people should have to live on $3 a day to learn financial wisdom. Maria's suffering was real and traumatic and caused damage that took years to heal. But it does mean that the lessons available through struggle, if we survive that struggle, if we emerge from it with our spirit intact, those lessons have value that money alone can never purchase. Maria understood money in a way that people who have never had to worry about money simply cannot understand. She understood that every dollar represents a choice, a possibility, a piece of freedom. She understood that financial security isn't about having unlimited resources, but about having enough to meet your needs with some margin for error, some cushion against disaster. 4 years after starting her job at the insurance company, Maria was promoted again, this time to a supervisory role managing a small team of data entry clerks. Her salary increased to $55,000 annually, plus benefits. She moved out of her studio apartment in Newark and into a small one-bedroom in a safer neighborhood. She bought furniture from a thrift store, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because she had learned to find value in simplicity, to appreciate quality over quantity, to make thoughtful choices about her resources. She sent money to her mother in Guatemala every month, not $20 tucked into a birthday card, but $200 wired electronically, enough to make a real difference in her mother's life, enough to pay back some of the debt she felt she owed to the woman who had raised her. But the most important thing Maria did with her new financial stability was invest in others the way someone had invested in her. She created an informal fund, setting aside $100 each month that she used to help people in situations similar to the one she had escaped. Sometimes it was a co-worker who needed grocery money until payday. Sometimes it was someone at church who needed help with a utility bill. Sometimes it was a stranger at the library who mentioned they were struggling to afford a bus pass to get to a job interview. Maria gave this money freely, without judgment, without expectation of repayment, because she understood that sometimes a small amount of money at the right moment can change everything, that sometimes the difference between staying trapped and breaking free is just a few dollars, just a bit of help, just someone believing in you enough to take a chance. And here's the thing about generosity, about giving money away when you're still building your own security, still recovering from your own trauma of poverty. It might seem financially irresponsible. Traditional financial advice would say that Maria should have been saving every penny, maximizing her retirement contributions, building her emergency fund to 6 months or a year of expenses. And that advice isn't wrong. It's important to build security, to plan for the future, to create a stable foundation. But Maria understood something that pure financial calculation misses. Money is a tool, not a purpose. The point of having money isn't to accumulate as much as possible, but to use it in ways that create value, that improve lives, that make the world slightly better than it was. And sometimes giving money away, investing in other people, is the best use of that money, even if it doesn't show up as profit in your account. 5 years after seeing that yellow flyer at the library, Maria had completely transformed her life. She earned a comfortable living, lived in a decent apartment, had savings and investments, sent money to family, helped others in need, and felt, for the first time since coming to America, that she was living rather than merely surviving. But she never forgot those 782 days of $3 a day. She kept that old notebook in a drawer in her bedroom, And sometimes, late at night, she would take it out and read through those careful entries, those small poems of deprivation, and she would feel gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the decision that had changed everything, for the strength she had found when she thought she had nothing left. Now, I want to tell you something important, something that connects Maria's story to your life, wherever you are, whatever your circumstances. You might be thinking that Maria's story is exceptional, that it's inspiring but not applicable to your situation, that you don't have the strength or courage or desperation to make the kind of sacrifice she made. But that's not true. Everyone, absolutely everyone, faces moments of decision where they have to choose between staying where they are and risking something for the possibility of change. These moments might look different for different people. Maybe it's deciding to go back to school when you have bills to pay. Maybe it's leaving a stable but unfulfilling job for an uncertain opportunity that aligns with your passions. Maybe it's starting a business when you have no guarantee of success. Maybe it's learning a new skill, changing careers, moving to a new city, ending a relationship that's holding you back, or beginning one that requires vulnerability. The specifics are different, but the fundamental challenge is the same. Do you invest in possibility when the cost of that investment is real and painful and immediate, while the potential payoff is uncertain and distant? Do you give up something you have now for something you might have later? Do you risk failure for the chance at transformation? These are the questions that define financial success, far more than how much money you make, or what investment returns you achieve, or which assets you accumulate. Because financial success, real financial success, the kind that matters and lasts and makes life better, is ultimately about having the courage to invest in your own potential, even when that investment seems impossible. If you're watching this right now, and you're facing one of these decisions, comment below and tell me about it. Share your struggle, your fear, your hope. And if this story has moved you, if Maria's journey has taught you something, or made you think differently about money and sacrifice and transformation, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because this is what we do here. We tell stories about real people making real financial decisions, stories that teach us what money really means and what wealth really is. Here's another layer to Maria's story, something that emerged gradually over the years as she reflected on her journey and what it meant. The decision to attend those computer classes, the choice to sacrifice $72 a week when she was barely surviving, that wasn't just a financial decision. It was an act of rebellion against the narrative that poverty writes about your life. Poverty tells you that you are powerless, that your circumstances define you, that you should accept your situation because attempting to change it will only lead to failure and deeper suffering. Poverty is a story that traps people in the present moment, making it impossible to imagine or plan for a different future. When Maria chose to give up those 2 work shifts, she was rejecting that narrative. She was saying, in effect, I am not trapped. I have agency. I can make choices that change my trajectory. I can invest in myself even when I have nothing. This act of resistance, this refusal to accept the story poverty was telling her, was perhaps more important than the actual computer skills she learned. Because the skills were just tools, but the belief in her own agency, in her own potential, in her own worth as someone deserving of investment, that was transformative in a way that transcended any particular job or salary or financial outcome. Think about how radical this is. Maria had every reason to believe that she was stuck, that her situation was permanent, that she would spend the rest of her life surviving on $3 a day or close to it, gradually fading away until she disappeared completely. Society had given her every message that she was invisible, that her life didn't matter, that she was just one more poor person in a city full of poor people, unremarkable and unworthy of attention. But she refused to believe that story. She chose instead to believe that she could change, that she had value, that her life could be different. And that choice, that act of belief against all evidence, was what made everything else possible. This is the wisdom that Maria's story offers us, the lesson that goes beyond financial advice or career strategy or personal development platitudes. Real change begins with a decision to believe that change is possible, even when you have no evidence, even when your circumstances scream that change is impossible, even when the smart, safe, rational choice would be to accept your situation and stop hoping for better. This isn't about positive thinking or manifestation or any kind of magical belief that wishing makes things so. It's about recognizing that human beings have the capacity to shape their lives through the choices they make, and that sometimes the most important choice is to refuse the narrative that says you have no choices. Maria learned this lesson through suffering, through hunger, through the long months of sacrifice when she had no guarantee that her gamble would pay off. But you don't have to learn it that way. You can learn it through her story, through her example, through understanding what she discovered about agency and investment and the relationship between present sacrifice and future possibility. You can look at your own life, your own circumstances, your own challenges, and ask yourself, where have I accepted a narrative that says I'm stuck, that says I can't change, that says my situation is permanent? And where might I need to make a decision, a sacrifice, an investment that seems impossible but could lead to transformation? 6 years after starting her job at the insurance company, Maria was offered a position in the Human Resources Department, working specifically with employee development and training. The salary was $68,000 plus benefits, and the role aligned perfectly with her growing passion for helping others access the same kind of opportunities that had transformed her life. She accepted the position and threw herself into the work with the same intensity she had brought to everything since making that original decision to attend the computer classes. She developed training programs, mentored new employees, worked with community organizations to create pipelines for hiring people from disadvantaged backgrounds. She became, in essence, a bridge between worlds, someone who understood both the language of poverty and the language of professional success, and who could help people cross from one to the other. In this role, Maria encountered many people whose stories reminded her of her own. There was James, a former construction worker who had lost his job after an injury and was trying to transition to office work. There was Keisha, a single mother of 3 who had been cleaning houses for years and wanted stable employment with benefits. There was Miguel, an immigrant from El Salvador who spoke limited English but had accounting skills from his home country that could be adapted to the American system. Each of these people had potential, had determination, had dreams, but they also had obstacles, gaps in their experience, rough edges that didn't fit the smooth surfaces of corporate hiring processes. Maria advocated for these people. She vouched for them, trained them, gave them chances that others wouldn't have given. And more often than not, they succeeded, because what they needed wasn't charity but opportunity, wasn't handouts but investment, wasn't pity but belief in their capacity to grow and contribute. Maria understood this because she had lived it, because she knew what it meant to have potential that no one could see, to have determination that no one valued, to have dreams that everyone dismissed. She understood that sometimes people don't need money or resources as much as they need someone to see them, to believe in them, to give them a chance. And here's what's beautiful about this part of Maria's story, what makes it more than just an individual success narrative. The investment that Maria made in herself, that $1,152 of lost wages, that sacrifice that seemed so costly at the time, that decision that could have ended in failure and deeper poverty. That investment didn't just transform her life. It created a ripple effect that touched dozens of other lives, maybe hundreds, as the years went by. Every person Maria hired, trained, and advocated for went on to build their own stable lives, to support their own families, to invest in their own futures. Some of them went on to help others in turn, creating their own ripple effects. The impact of that original decision, that choice to spend $72 a week on computer classes when she was living on $3 a day, that impact compounded over time in ways that can't be measured but are nonetheless real and profound. This is the hidden mathematics of generosity and investment in human potential. When you invest in yourself, when you take a risk on your own growth and capacity, you're not just improving your own circumstances, you're creating the possibility that you will be able to help others, that you will be in a position to lift others up, that you will become someone who makes the world slightly better through the choices you make and the opportunities you extend. This return on investment doesn't show up in your bank account, but it shows up in the fabric of community, in the lives of people you've touched, in the slow work of building a more just and equitable world. Now, before we get to the end of Maria's story, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect. Think about the people in your life who have invested in you, who have taken chances on you, who have believed in your potential when you didn't believe in yourself. Maybe it was a teacher, a mentor, a family member, a friend, a boss, a stranger who showed unexpected kindness. Take a second and leave a comment honoring that person, telling their story, passing along the gratitude you feel. And if you've been watching this entire story, if you've stayed with Maria through her journey from $3 a day to meaningful prosperity, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Make sure you hit that like button, because these stories matter, these lessons matter, and you need to hear them all. 7 years after seeing that yellow flyer, Maria had saved $70,000. She had learned to live comfortably but modestly, to spend thoughtfully, to save consistently, to invest wisely. She had built not just financial security, but financial wisdom, a deep understanding of money that came not from textbooks or financial advisors, but from lived experience, from having been poor and learning what money means when you have none, and then becoming comfortable and learning what money means when you have enough. This dual perspective, this ability to see money from both sides of the divide, gave her insights that most people never develop. She understood, for instance, that money is most valuable at the margins. The difference between $0 and $1,000 is enormous, life-changing. The difference between desperation and hope. But the difference between $100,000 and $101,000 is barely noticeable, doesn't change your daily life at all, is essentially meaningless in terms of well-being or happiness. This understanding shaped how she thought about her own resources and how she helped others think about theirs. She knew that for someone living on $3 a day, $50 could mean food for more than 2 weeks, could mean the ability to buy interview clothes, could mean the bus fare to get to a training program. She knew that small amounts of money, given at the right time to the right person, could have outsized impact. She also understood that poverty is expensive, that being poor costs money in ways that people who have never been poor don't realize. When you're poor, you can't buy in bulk, so you pay more per unit for everything. You can't afford quality items that last, so you buy cheap things that break and have to be replaced constantly. You can't afford preventive health care, so you end up in emergency rooms with conditions that could have been treated early and cheaply. You can't afford a car, so you spend hours on public transportation or walking, time that could be spent working or training or sleeping. You can't afford to live near your job, so you pay more in time and money for commuting. Poverty compounds itself, creating a cycle that's almost impossible to break without outside help or extraordinary effort or luck. Maria's story illustrates what it takes to break that cycle. It takes sacrifice, yes, but not just any sacrifice. It takes strategic sacrifice, the kind where you give up something now for the possibility of gain later, where you invest in capability rather than just survival. It takes courage, the willingness to risk failure, to bet on yourself when you have nothing to bet with. It takes persistence, the ability to keep going when there's no evidence that you're making progress, when everything feels hopeless and pointless and impossible. It takes learning, acquiring new skills and knowledge that expand your possibilities. It takes opportunity, someone or something giving you a chance when you have no credentials or track record. And it takes a refusal to accept the narrative that poverty writes about your life, a stubborn insistence that you are more than your circumstances, that you have value and potential and deserve better. 8 years after that first computer class, Maria bought a house. It was a small house, a modest 2-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood, nothing fancy or impressive, but it was hers. She had saved $30,000 for the down payment, had secured a mortgage with a reasonable interest rate, had calculated carefully that she could afford the monthly payments while still saving for retirement and maintaining her informal fund for helping others. The day she moved in, she sat on the floor of her empty living room and cried, thinking about the woman who had counted coins on a kitchen table, who had lived in a studio apartment where the radiator clanged through the night, who had eaten 1 egg every 3 days and considered it a meal. The distance between that woman and the woman sitting in her own house seemed almost infinite. The transformation so complete, it felt like 2 different lives, 2 different people, 2 different universes. But Maria knew they were connected, that the woman counting coins had made the decision that led to the woman owning a house, that every step of the journey had been necessary, that even the suffering had served a purpose because it had taught her things she could never have learned any other way. She didn't regret those $3 days exactly. She would never choose to live through them again, would never wish them on anyone, but she couldn't deny that they had shaped her, had taught her, had given her a perspective on money and life that made her wiser and stronger and more compassionate than she would have been otherwise. That evening, sitting in her empty house, Maria took out her old notebook, that small spiral-bound record of survival. She turned to a blank page near the end and wrote something she had been thinking about for a long time, a kind of summation of everything she had learned through her journey. She wrote, "Real wealth isn't about money. It's about having choices. It's about being able to imagine a future different from your present. It's about believing in your own capacity to change and grow. It's about understanding that every dollar represents possibility, every sacrifice represents investment, every decision shapes your trajectory. And it's about remembering, when you have enough, what it felt like to have nothing, so that you never take your security for granted and you never forget to help others who are where you once were." These weren't just words. They were the distilled wisdom of 8 years, of transformation from $3 a day to meaningful prosperity, of learning what money really means through the crucible of poverty and the blessing of opportunity. Maria read what she had written, then closed the notebook and put it in a box with other important documents, saving it not as a reminder of suffering, but as a testament to possibility, to the human capacity for change, to the power of a single decision made with courage when everything argues for playing it safe. Now we're approaching the end of Maria's story, but before we get there, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't a story about one woman's exceptional journey. This is a story about principles that apply to everyone, about financial wisdom that transcends individual circumstances, about lessons that matter whether you're living on $3 a day or making 6 figures. The specifics of Maria's situation may be unique, but the fundamental challenges she faced, the decisions she had to make, the courage she had to find. These are universal. Everyone, at some point in their life, has to decide whether to invest in themselves, even when that investment is costly. Everyone has to choose between present security and future possibility. Everyone has to find the courage to change when changing seems impossible. So as you hear the conclusion of Maria's story, I want you to be thinking about your own story, your own decisions, your own possibilities. Where in your life do you need to make an investment that seems too costly? Where do you need to sacrifice something in the present for something better in the future? Where do you need to find the courage to change? Comment below and share your thoughts, your struggles, your commitments. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Make sure you've hit that like button, because these stories, these lessons, this wisdom, it's all here waiting for you. Video after video, story after story, teaching you what money really means and what wealth really is. 9 years after seeing that yellow flyer at the library, Maria was invited to speak at a community event about financial literacy and overcoming poverty. She was nervous about public speaking, had never done anything like it before, but she agreed because she thought maybe her story could help someone, could give someone the hope or courage or perspective they needed to make their own transformation. She stood in front of a room of about 50 people, mostly women, mostly immigrants, mostly struggling with the same kinds of challenges she had once faced, and she told them her story. She told them about living on $3 a day, about the decision to give up work shifts for computer classes, about the months of hunger and uncertainty, about the job that changed everything, about the lessons she had learned about money and sacrifice and investment. When she finished speaking, the room was silent for a moment, and then someone in the back started clapping, and then everyone was clapping, and some people were crying, and several came up afterward to thank her, to tell her their own stories, to ask for advice. One woman, probably in her 30s, with tired eyes and worn clothes, asked Maria what she should do about her situation. She was working 2 part-time jobs, neither with benefits, barely making enough to pay rent and feed her 3 kids, and she wanted to go back to school to become a nurse, but couldn't see how it was possible when she had no time and no money and no support. Maria looked at this woman and saw herself 9 years ago, saw the same desperation and fear and tiny flickering hope. What Maria told her, what she tells everyone in similar situations, is this: you have to make a choice. You have to decide whether you're willing to sacrifice in the present for possibility in the future. You have to be honest with yourself about what you're willing to give up and what you're not. And you have to understand that there are no guarantees, that you might make the sacrifice and still fail, that risk is inherent in change, but that the alternative, staying where you are, is its own kind of risk, the risk of permanence, of never becoming who you could be, of looking back at the end of your life and wondering what might have been if only you had had the courage to try. She told this woman to look for resources, to investigate training programs and scholarships and childcare assistance and community support, to piece together a path forward from whatever materials were available. She told her not to expect it to be easy or quick, that transformation takes time and effort and persistence. She told her to believe in herself even when no one else does, to remember that she has value and potential regardless of her circumstances. And she told her to keep track of her journey, to write down her decisions and her struggles and her small victories, so that someday, when she had made it to the other side, she would be able to look back and see how far she had come, and maybe help someone else make the same journey. After the event, Maria drove home to her small house thinking about that woman, about all the people still trapped in the cycle of poverty that she had escaped, about how much luck and privilege and opportunity had played a role in her transformation alongside her effort and sacrifice. She thought about the librarian who had helped her sign up for the computer class, the instructor who had taught her with patience and encouragement, the church volunteers who had given her clothes for the interview, the office manager who had taken a chance on hiring someone with her background, all the people who had made small decisions that had huge impact on her life. She understood that her story wasn't just about her own determination. It was about a web of support and opportunity that had caught her when she was falling. This understanding made her even more committed to creating opportunities for others, to being part of that web of support for people who were where she had once been. She increased her monthly contribution to her informal fund for helping others. She volunteered more hours at the church clothing closet. She worked within her company to create more pathways for hiring people from disadvantaged backgrounds. She advocated for policies that would make training more accessible, that would support workers trying to improve their skills, that would create bridges from poverty to prosperity. She understood that individual transformation was important, but that systemic change was necessary, that her story was both inspiring and infuriating. Inspiring because it showed what's possible, but infuriating because it shouldn't require such extreme sacrifice for people to access opportunity. 10 years after seeing that yellow flyer, Maria was promoted to Director of Human Resources at the insurance company. Her salary was $95,000, plus benefits and bonuses. She had saved over $100,000, invested in retirement accounts, paid off her house, and built a life that was stable, comfortable, and meaningful. But the most important metric of her success wasn't any of these numbers. It was the fact that she woke up every morning with purpose, with gratitude, with a sense that her life mattered and was contributing something positive to the world. It was the fact that she could help others without sacrificing her own security. It was the fact that she had choices, real choices, about how to live and what to do with her resources and where to invest her time and energy. She still kept that old notebook, still looked at it sometimes, still marveled at the distance she had traveled from $3 a day to Director of Human Resources. But she also understood that the journey wasn't really about the distance. It was about the lessons learned along the way, about what she had discovered about money and sacrifice and investment and human potential. She understood that wealth isn't primarily about accumulation, but about relationship. About how you think about money, how you use money, what money means in the context of a life well lived. She understood that the decision she had made 10 years ago, to give up $72 a week for computer classes when she was barely surviving, that decision was the most profitable investment she had ever made, not because of the financial return, though that was significant, but because of what it taught her about herself and her capacity to shape her own life. As we reach the end of Maria's story, I want to leave you with the lessons that her journey teaches, the wisdom that emerges from her transformation. First, never underestimate the power of a single decision. Maria's entire life changed because she chose to sign up for a free computer class, a choice that seemed small at the time, but that required significant sacrifice and led to everything that followed. You might be facing a similar choice right now, something that seems insignificant, but that could alter your entire trajectory. Don't dismiss it. Consider it carefully. Make the brave choice. Second, investment in yourself is the most reliable form of investment. The stock market can crash, real estate can depreciate, businesses can fail. But skills and knowledge and capability, these are assets that can never be taken from you, that will generate returns for the rest of your life. Maria invested in herself when she had nothing, and that investment paid compound returns that continue to this day. Third, sacrifice is not the same as suffering. Maria suffered during those months of living on less than $3 a day while attending computer classes, but that suffering had purpose, had direction, was in service of something larger. Purposeful sacrifice, strategic sacrifice, sacrifice that serves your long-term goals and dreams. This is different from pointless suffering, from enduring hardship that leads nowhere. Learn to distinguish between the two. Fourth, financial wisdom comes not from having money, but from understanding money. Maria learned more about wealth from living on $3 a day than most people learn in a lifetime of comfortable living. She understood the value of a dollar, the weight of a decision, the cost of a choice, the power of discipline and patience and strategic thinking. This wisdom is available to anyone willing to pay attention, willing to learn, willing to see money not as an end in itself, but as a tool for building the life you want. Fifth, generosity and security are not opposites. Maria helped others while still building her own wealth, gave money away while still saving, invested in other people while still investing in herself. She understood that true security comes not from hoarding resources, but from being connected to community, from being someone who both gives and receives, from building relationships of mutual support and care. Sixth, your circumstances do not define your possibilities. Maria lived on $3 a day, was malnourished and exhausted, and seemingly trapped, but she refused to accept that her situation was permanent. She chose to believe she could change, and that belief, more than anything else, was what made her transformation possible. You are not trapped. You have agency. You can make choices that change your trajectory. The path forward might not be clear, the cost might be high, the outcome might be uncertain, but the possibility is real. And finally, the most important lesson: wealth is about choices, not dollars. Maria is wealthier now not primarily because she has money, but because she has options. She can choose how to spend her time. She can choose who to help. She can choose what work to do. She can choose where to live. She can choose her priorities and values and goals. This freedom, this autonomy, this agency, this is what wealth really means. And it's available to anyone willing to make the decisions, the sacrifices, the investments that create it. Maria's story, the story of living on $3 a day until one decision changed everything, is ultimately a story about hope. Not naive hope, not magical thinking, not the belief that wishing makes things so, but earned hope, tested hope, hope that survives struggle and emerges stronger. It's the hope that comes from understanding that you have power, that your choices matter, that change is possible even when it seems impossible, that you can shape your life through the decisions you make, and the courage you find, and the persistence you maintain. Wherever you are right now, whatever your circumstances, whatever challenges you're facing, Maria's story is here to tell you that transformation is possible. It won't be easy. It will require sacrifice. There are no guarantees. But it's possible. And sometimes, the difference between staying trapped and breaking free is just one decision, one choice, one act of courage that changes everything. If this story has moved you, if these lessons have resonated, if you see something of yourself in Maria's journey, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button. Second, leave a comment sharing your own story, your own decision, your own transformation, or the transformation you're working toward. And third, subscribe to this channel because every video here is like this one, telling real stories about real people making real financial decisions, teaching lessons that matter, providing wisdom that can change your life. These stories are here for you. These lessons are yours to learn from. This wisdom is available to anyone willing to listen. Maria still lives in Newark, in that same small house she bought 8 years ago. She still works at the insurance company, though now as Director of Human Resources with responsibility for hundreds of employees. She still keeps that old notebook, that record of 782 days of $3 a day, as a reminder of where she came from and what she learned and who she became through the journey. She still helps others, still invests in human potential, still believes that the best use of money is creating opportunity for people who deserve a chance. She still remembers what it felt like to count coins on a kitchen table, to feel hunger as a constant companion, to live in fear and desperation and seemingly permanent poverty. But she also remembers making the decision to attend that computer class, to sacrifice those 2 work shifts, to invest in herself when she had nothing. She remembers the courage it took, the fear she felt, the uncertainty she lived with during those long months when she didn't know if her gamble would pay off. And she knows, with absolute certainty, that it was the right decision, the best decision, the decision that changed everything. Not because it led to financial success, though it did. Not because it led to a better job, though it did. But because it taught her something invaluable about herself, about her capacity to change, about her power to shape her own life, about her worth as a human being who deserves opportunity and dignity and hope. That decision, made 10 years ago by a woman living on $3 a day, continues to ripple outward, touching lives, creating opportunities, proving that transformation is possible, that courage matters, that investment in human potential pays, returns that can't be measured, but are nonetheless real and profound. Maria's story is her own, but it's also universal, a testament to the power of a single choice, a reminder that we are all capable of more than we imagine, an invitation to believe in possibility even when everything argues against it. This is what money means at its deepest level, not consumption, not status, not security in the conventional sense, but freedom. The freedom to make choices, the freedom to invest in yourself, the freedom to help others, the freedom to become who you're capable of being. Maria found that freedom through sacrifice and courage and persistence and one decision that changed everything. And that same freedom is available to you, waiting for you on the other side of your own decision, your own sacrifice, your own investment in possibility. The question is, will you make it?